Today we're going to talk about coastal transportation. Transportation, if you remember, is when something is moved from one place to another, in this case by the action of the sea. Before we go on, we'll just try and recap one or two things from last lesson. The wind direction dictates the wave direction, so whichever way the wind is going, that's the way the waves will go too. When a wave breaks on the shoreline, the movement of the wave up the shoreline is called the swash. And when the wave drains back out to sea, we call that the backwash. And those terms will be useful for you as we go through the next few slides. So imagine this situation. The wind is approaching the shoreline at a right angle. That means the wave will also approach the shoreline at a right angle. So the swash will move material up the beach towards the back of the beach. The backwash will move the material back down to the sea again. So if you imagine a pebble on this beach, it will just move up and down the beach with each wave. Now if that's a destructive wave, it might remove material from the beach completely. If it's a constructive wave, it might push it further back up the beach and pile more material on it. But that movement is still just up and down the beach. But what happens if the wave approaches the shoreline at an angle? Well, in that case, the wind blowing that wave will cause the swash to be at an angle too. So the swash will travel diagonally up the beach. The backwash, which is pulled by gravity, will travel straight back down the beach at right angles to the beach. And that process will repeat with each wave, swash, backwash, swash, creating a zigzag motion. So any material on that beach over time will move in that zigzag motion with the swash and backwash. Over a period of time, then if you think about a particular pebble on this beach, it will move along the beach. And this is a process that we call longshore drift. Here's another diagram which shows that in a slightly more simplistic way. You can see the direction of the prevailing wind and therefore the waves at an angle to the beach, and you can see alternating swash and backwash carrying material along the beach by longshore drift. Now this can create all sorts of features. As it carries material along the beach, it will extend the beach along the coastline. Obviously, it transports material along the beach. But there are other features that we're going to look at too. And these are spits, bars, and tombolos. The first feature is a spit. In the distance in this particular picture, which is of Hurst Castle Spit, you can see the beach. But then there's this beautiful hooked beach which stands out from the coastline, and that's called the spit. So spits formed when longshore drift creates that zigzagging motion. You can see it here with the red arrows, and as the material gets to a change in the direction of the coastline, it continues to be moved in that same direction along the coast by longshore drift, building gradually outwards from the coastline to create this hook. Now the spit hooks round because wind direction can come from different directions and hook that round. But generally speaking, a spit is a piece of beach that extends out from the coastline, like you can see on this diagram here. So here we go in stages. You can see the stages 1 through to 5 here. Number 1, sediment are carried along the beach by longshore drift. We've explained that before. Number 2, there's a change in the direction of the coastline. 3, the sand continues to build up in the same direction it was being moved by longshore drift. 4, waves approaching from a different direction hook the end of the spit around. And number 5, I didn't mention before, but you've now got a relatively sheltered area of water, and into there you get what we call a salt marsh. That sheltered area gets deposition, making it shallow. Salt tolerant plants grow in there and you get what's called a salt marsh. Our next feature is called a bar. These form in a very similar way. When longshore drift carries material along the coastline and we get to a change in the direction of the coastline here, a slightly different thing happens. So here you can see a bar as a diagram, and you can see that longshore drift has carried material along the beach, but it's just extended across an old bay and reached all the way to the other side. and that's blocked off an area of water that we call a lagoon. And a famous one is called Slapton Lay, which is in Devon, and you can see it in the photograph here. And finally we get my favourite. This is called a tombolo, and this particular one, Angel Road in Japan, is really beautiful and it attracts a lot of tourists. In fact, this is my particular favourite tombolo. This is Koh Nang Yuan in Thailand. I've visited this place a couple of times. It's absolutely beautiful. What happens here is that a spit is created, but that it reaches an island, and so it connects the island to the mainland. So again, you can see in the diagram longshore drift, transporting material along the coastline, changing the direction of the coastline. The spit forms, but it grows out and meets the island. In the case of Koh Nang Yuan, it's actually between 3 islands. There is no large area of land, so you just get this Y shape of sand connecting 3 islands. So you're going to do some activities for me now to see what you've understood. The first and the most important task is to understand how longshore drift works. So you're going to create a diagram. Make sure you draw it nice and big, looking at all the key features: the direction of the wind, the direction of the waves, the swash and the backwash, creating that zigzag motion, and then an arrow to show the overall direction of longshore drift over time. Make sure that you label or annotate your diagram to show what's happening, putting the stages with numbers so you can see the order that they happen in. Make this really clear. This is the most important bit of learning. If you get beyond that, then there is a sheet which you can then use, which looks at the formation of the different features, the spits, the bars and the tombolos. And you can explain how these are created by the action of longshore drift. Now, there's a website on this slide that you can see as well. It's a really clear explanation, but of course you can go back over this presentation as well if you want the information.